as an entrepreneur just starting out, I've been told that that it would be good to raise money from friends and family. Most of those people that are saying that have friends and family who have been able to give them, sizable amounts of money. But for those of us who don't have those means and those contacts, what do I do?
Sweat equity is the best equity. You start smaller. Most businesses, I'd say at least 90, if not 95% or more percentage of small businesses, startups, can start without raising any capital at all. You just use sweat equity. Now, obviously, we don't know what kind of business she's trying to start, but you just have to try to start smaller. The hard part for most people is that trade-off between, do I keep my job or how do I start a company when I have a job? Most people feel like they need to raise money so they can quit their job.
So do you advocate they quit their job?
No.
You say, go make it happen, get some revenue in, prove it out a little bit.
I worked as a bartender at night. Whatever you have to do, that's part of being an entrepreneur. So if you have to work on weekends, you have to Uber at night, Uber on weekends, so you have some income coming in so you can work on your company, or you work your regular job during the week, and at night and weekends, that's when you work on your startup.
So the good news there is anybody can be an entrepreneur if they're willing to work their ass off 24 hours.
That's what it takes.
That's your message, sir.
Like they always say, entrepreneurs work 80 hours so they don't have to work 40.
Pat, how do I raise money, man? I got an idea. I think it's going to be great, but I need money. How do I go get backing, So now let's get right into it. 6 different methods on raising money. Number 1, very basic, bootstrapping. What is bootstrapping? I'm using my own money to start my business. This is my own money that I'm using. Where am I going to get the money from? Now, there are different places you can get your money from. One is cash savings. That is probably the best way for you to do it. It's cash savings you're getting. Another one is that you hear about a lot nowadays is ROBS. It's called Rollover Business Startup Capital. I think it's Rollover for Business Startups is what ROBS stands for, literally ROBS, which means you have $300,000 in your 401k. And typically, if you take money out of your 401k, you're going to have to pay the taxes on it, and you may paying the penalties if you're under the age of 59 and a half. So what do you mean? I can take the money out? Yes, there's a way of doing it. Talk to your accountant where you can take that money, put into your business, not pay any taxes or the penalties, but you have to start a 401k to be able to use that as an investment capital. There are some pros and cons to it. I don't recommend it, but there are some people that do recommend it. And then there's HELOCs where some people take money out of their mortgage and they get a home equity line of credit, low interest rate. I take that money and I fund my business at $700,000 of equity in my company. I'm taking $250,000 to fund my business. And then some do with credit cards, which is absolutely pathetic. There's a lot of people out there that will recommend you to finance your business with credit cards. Matter of fact, there is guys that literally will go and sell you the idea of, I have 50 credit cards here. It's $400,000, and guess what? If I use this money and it fails, it's not my problem, it's the bank's problem. The banks have all this money, who cares? I'll file bankruptcy and come back up. Terrible idea to buy into. Shysters who want to make money off you and the banks, and quite frankly, that's somebody that's not thinking long term, because if you ever want to build a massive company, guess what? You got to be thinking about that one day I may be needing a big bank to give me $600 million or $300 million or that type of money. I ought to start building those relationships now. But bootstrapping the basic way, it's your own cash. You take the money, you start the business. That's one of the ways I did it. Now, one of the reasons why people do that is the following reason. You get to keep control longer, and you get to have a better proven product, so when you go to investors, you have something to show for, right? That's the formula I took for myself on one of my businesses. So it's bootstrapping, your own money, your own savings, you're on the line. The investor says, if this guy put his life savings into it, guess what? He's serious. I took the approach of putting my entire life savings into it. I grew the company, and then I got an investor, Oscar de la Hoya, Gabriel Brenner, who is the first Mexican board sports owner in America. He owns the Houston Dynamo and Atalaya Group. Atalaya Group is a good-sized fund out of New York. It's a $5 billion fund. Then and I went and got an 8-figure check from these guys on raising money, but I had proven track record on what the numbers were looking like. That's bootstrapping, right? You keep more equity, you give up less later on when you ask for money. Okay, so the second way you can raise money is a traditional loan from a bank, or some call it the SBA loan. Now, this used to be more common back in the days But the banks are not as loose with their money today as they used to be. Now, what will work for you with these banks is 4 different criteria they'll typically look for. A steady income, a 700 plus credit score, equity in your home, and last but not least, industry experience and expertise. Obviously, you got to bring your business plan. And the SBA program has 2 different things in America. One is called the community program that they have, which is up to $250,000 they'll give you. And then the other one is a micro loan, which is $50,000. I think you got to give 30% down payment up front for them to be willing to do that. Is that way to go? It's the slowest, just so you know. And it's not a fast process you're going through. It's the least likely, and it's very slow, very annoying to go through that route, but it is one of the routes to go to on raising money. Number 3 is crowdfunding. What are we talking about with crowdfunding? Crowdfunding is this whole thing with, GoFundMe, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. There's so many great crowdfunders out there. And what crowdfunding is exactly what it says. Crowd, audience, large audience, funding your idea. You go onto these websites. It works typically if you have a prototype product and you say, here's my prototype product. This is when I said earlier, the guy who goes and raises $25,000, $18,000 for the actual product, $7,000 for the design. And then he takes this idea and puts it on a video and says, here's what this does. This does this, that. Okay? And here's what we're asking for. Level 1, you be the first one to get it. Level 2, this. Level 3, this. Level 4. And if you want to be an investor, level 5, $100,000 gets you 2% ownership in a company, 5% ownership in a company, and a board seat. Whatever. You can do that part with some of these sites you go to. We had an issue that happened. You saw J.J. Watt from Houston, Texas, wanted to raise a couple $100,000 for what happened in Houston after Harvey, the hurricane that hit. Ended up being a $40+ million fund. Small account, it spread when wildfire. A linebacker turned this thing into a $40 million fund that he gave to Houston. We started off with one of our guys was raising small amount of money. We're a couple $1,000s to help Houston. All of a sudden we got it to $55,000 and we helped so many families with their cars, homes. So it's not that hard to do it today, especially with the access to Facebook, Twitter, social media, Snap, Instagram. It's a lot easier to raise money that way. 4th is incubators and accelerators. There's a lot of great incubators and accelerators. They differ. Some of the incubators allow you to come in. You literally come and they'll give you a little bit of money. And you have mentoring, you have people that advise you on what to do with your idea, and they're kind of getting you going. It's typically a big office space. One of the ones we went to was in Boston. They have 300 different businesses there, and you're literally sitting there. Hey, I do this. Anybody here does this? Yeah, let's collaborate. Hey, I do this. Anybody? Yes, let's go. Hey, have you thought about doing this to your site? What about if you do this? Have you thought about contacting these guys? And they give you some money, and it's an incubator, accelerator, and eventually the goal is to go out and open up your own office, your own operation, but they're at least getting you going. It works very well with the younger audience. You'll see a lot of 18, 19, 22, 23-year-olds and incubators. And by the way, there's good ones in SoCal. There's good one in Austin, Texas, New York, Chicago, Florida. Nowadays, there's ones everywhere. Tennessee, there's a lot of great incubators that you can be a part of. Simply go search incubator. You're 19-year-old with a good idea and you drop out from college because you're obsessed with your idea that you have and you got 3 friends, you guys want to make it work. Type in incubators in your local area, search which one's the best and find out a way to get connected with them. Okay, so now that we've covered the first 4, let's talk about the difference between angel investors, which is the 5th one, and then we'll talk about venture capitalists right after that. Angel investor is an individual, wealthy person who made their money and is willing to invest into another entrepreneur. And there's 2 different types of angels. One is friends and family, that's warm market, and the other one is cold market, somebody you don't know. Let's first talk about an angel that's a warm market. Typically, angel is less than $1 million investment. Many times it's only $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 that they put into it. Friends and family, okay. So you got a mom, dad, brother, sister, uncle, your best friend's dad who loves you, always saw you there, loved the fact that you gave good influence to his son, or your girlfriend's father who never had a son that likes you, or your boyfriend's father who never had a daughter that likes you. And you go up and say, hey, Uncle Johnny, hey, Pops, hey, Mom, hey, bro, hey, Mr. Jones, look, I have this idea. This is what I want to do, and I'd like to be able to raise some money. I need your help. What do you think about this idea? And you go through them, say, I think I need around, they're going to ask you, what do you think, how much you think you need? I need around $50,000. And sometimes the best question to ask is, who do you know that would be willing to help this? I would love for you to be, because I'll look up to you so much. But regardless of what it is, If you can get some of your friends and family that invest into your idea, that opens up the willingness of a cold market angel investor to be interested in your idea as well. Now, cold market's slightly different. They look for to see, if you're coming to me, has anybody in your family invested into this? So listen to this. This is what they're going to say. Have you had anybody in your friend and family invest into the business? Yes. Who? My father and my girlfriend's father did as well. How much? They gave me $50,000. Okay, cool. Have you put any of your own money into it? Yes. I had $10,000 in savings. I put the whole thing into it. Interesting. Okay, tell me what else you know about this industry. Tell me what's the differentiator. Those 10 questions that I asked you, that I told you earlier, you're presenting that to them. Then they say, great, give me a few days. What's your expectation on return? I think we can make 7x on this in 7 years. I think we can make this kind of money in this if we do this. No problem. Here's $100,000. No problem. Here's $250,000. Then you're doing the math and negotiation about what it is. And this video is not about the negotiation side. This video is simply about raising money and different ways you can go about doing it. So now that's angel. Now let's talk about venture capital. This is VCs that you're dealing with. These are firms, these are smart people, these are people that have dealt with a lot of different businesses. These are people that have access to incredible resources, contacts, networks. And so when you're dealing with them, you got to know what they want and what they're looking for. This is when you hear about such and such person had a Series A funding of, $9 million, $15 million, or they raised this much dollars. It's more than $1 million. VCs are not coming in for $600,000. They're not coming in for $800,000. They're coming in for real play. Matter of fact, they're offended if you come in for a small time number because, it's $1 billion fund. $600,000 is going to do nothing for it. Some of them will have a minimum. I spoke with a guy recently, their minimum is $30 million. They don't even entertain $15 million. They will literally tell you, we're sorry, we're not it, but you can talk to this guy, and they'll refer you to somebody. Don't forget to ask somebody who rejects you because you're asking for too little money if they know anybody that's in the market of the amount of money that you're asking for. It's very important for you to be asking that. So, few things. Number one, they want returns in 5 to 10 years. Some of them will push you for 3 years. Remember that. But you got to push off 3 years. Your goal is to get them 7 years. Very rarely will you get them 10 years. And here's why very rarely you'll get them 10 years. These are funds that get started. And the fund of a lifespan is 10 years. In the first 3 years, they're just kind of warming themselves up on who they want to go out there and get. And then once they get it, they're saying, we have 7 years, we wait patiently to do this. If you can get them at 7 years, that's the sweet spot. Next. VCs are looking for 10x returns. That's the number they're looking for. Remember, that is their thinking. And they'll typically tell you, we like our returns to be around 10x is what we're looking for. Okay, great. We like our minimums to be 5x within a 5-year period. We like 1x per year. Fair enough. They're going to tell you if you ask them these questions. And matter of fact, they'll be impressed with the fact that you're asking smart questions like that. They want a coachable CEO, and they're looking for a strong team. When I'm saying strong team, they want technical skills. Like, for instance, we have a visionary entrepreneur. He thinks he's going to go out there and take over the world. Great. But do people like working with him? Yes, he's got a technical guy with him that's incredible coding. Here's what he did before in the past, and he used to work with XYZ. Oh, wow. And he has this other guy that's on the board that Oh, wow, I like this. So they're looking for the team that you've put together, right? And then an idea key differentiator, we talked about that earlier. And obviously, if you're taking money from a VC, you're committing to pretty much doing something big. Because if you're not, they have zero interest in it if it isn't something big that you're willing to do yourself. So that's venture capitals.
In this video, I'm going to explain the single equation that helped me turn $1,036 into over $120 million in sales. And right now, our portfolio companies do about $85 million a year. So this concept has been the central concept to how we've grown each of our portfolio companies with 100% equity without taking on outside capital or investors, right? And so the key here is if you don't have a lot of money, you have to think different and play the game differently. Most people, when they try and play the game, when they get the investors from outside or they have some sort of seed capital of their own, they think I'm going to have to take 2 or 3 years before my business is break even or positive. And that is definitely a belief that you can have, but not necessarily one that you have to have. Right? And so I prefer to, change the variables of the game that we're playing to try and figure out a way to make money all the time, right? Because it's like, well, if I could make money the whole time, then that would make this definitely more fun and a lot less stressful. And so the equation that I'm going to outline for you is what I call client financed acquisition. This is how we grew our first I went from 0 to 6 locations at my brick and mortar chain in 3 years as a 26-year-old. And I was able to open up each of those locations at full capacity, except for the first one, obviously, but each of the ones after that, once I learned how to do this, on day one. So that's not normally common. So we were able to open up each facility at completely full capacity. And then I did this at 33 other locations over the next few years. After that, we transitioned to our licensing business, and we used the exact same model that I'm about to show you to go from 0 to $2.5 million a month within, I think it was like 12 or 14 months. And that's per month, not per year. So it went from 0 to 28 million top line, right? And then 12 months after that, we're at 4.4 million a month. The second business that added that up went from 0 to 1.7 million a month in 4 months. All right, the third business we started, our software business, went from 0 to also 1.7, ironically, within 6 months. All right, and so this equation matters. Profit matters if you want to be in a capitalist society, because it's the only way that you're gonna be able to weather the storms. All right, so this is the writer downer. This is an equation, but it's a process. All right, client financed acquisition. What this means in plain terms is get your customers to pay for all of your marketing and your acquisition costs. And so what that means is if you can plug into the universe's money, not your own money, but you plug into the money of the universe, you can pretty much cash flow anything you need, because you can make more money getting someone to enter your world than it costs you to get them there. And if that is your case, and you still have all the lifetime value that you're going to collect, but if you can do that in the first 30 days and you can pay the cost of fulfillment and still have money left over, then you have what is called a negative acquisition cost. All right, it means that you make money getting customers. All right, so this is the actual equation. You know the number 2, but then there's 3 things in here that you may or may not understand, and so I'm going to break down each of them. Let's call this number 1, let's call this number 2, let's call this number 3. So if I were to read this in plain English, it would say 30-day cash, oopsies, I usually write this the other way. 30-day cash must be greater than 2 times the cost of acquiring a customer and the cost of fulfilling that customer, okay? So what this means is cost of acquisition, all right? So let's say it cost me $100 to acquire a customer, and that includes my marketing team, that includes my sales guys and their commissions, that includes the advertising or whatever method I did to acquire the lead, okay? So let's say all in it cost me $100. I'm just using simple math here. Let's say that for me to fulfill this thing, whatever the thing is, let's say it cost me another $100, all right? So that's $200 that's gonna cost me to fulfill and sell this thing. These are my costs, right? And so the idea is I have to have 2 times the sum of this. All right, remember this is in our little parentheses, which means this is $400. That is what I must make, right? That has to be less than what I make in 30-day cash, which is a term that I use that I've never really heard anywhere else. I'm sure there's a fancier word for it, but I call it 30-day cash, which is the amount of money that I can collect in net free cash flow to my business within the first 30 days of a customer entering our world. Now, we may have upsells and downsells and continuity and future things that we're going to sell, but none of that matters to the small business owner who doesn't have cash. And so the reason it's 30 days is because that's the amount of time that you can get interest-free financing. All right, so if you have a credit card, people will extend you money for 30 days interest-free. That means if you pay it off in the first 30 days, you can pretty much take unlimited money, all right, for the most part. Now you pay your stuff off, you get bigger limits, whatever. But the point is, and this is literally how I started my second business, is that I would use my cards, I'd put the money on the card to acquire the customer. So on my card, there'd be $200 because that's what's gonna cost me to fulfill and acquire, but I would have made $400 on that. And the reason it has to be greater than this is because I have net, right? Because we have to take out the 200 that we lost here, right? Minus 200. So I have 200 left over. What a coincidence. That's the exact amount that it's gonna cost me to get another customer and fulfill that customer, which means that I'm gonna get, you guessed it, another $400 from this customer. And we play the game again, which means that you have unlimited power to acquire new customers, which means you get unlimited money, which is why if you play the game this way and you choose to think about acquisition in this manner, you can grow your companies without capital constraint. Now, it doesn't mean that there won't be constraints. There will be. You'll have operational constraints, you'll have hiring constraints, you'll have other things. But if you play the game this way, getting new customers and making sales will never be the thing that is limiting your company. It will be only you.
How to get startup funding for a small business. Are you at the beginning of your big business journey? Are you at the beginning with no leads, no contacts, and no profits, but you need money to really get your thing going? Well, you've stumbled across the right video. I'm Noelle, and I've taken tons of businesses from startup all the way to multi-million-dollar businesses. I'm gonna show you exactly how you can do it too. Let's go. Step one when it comes to truly starting a business and getting funding is start there. Focus on getting funding. The problem with most businesses is they start with thinking about the business too much. I'm not saying that you're not gonna think about your business and you shouldn't write out your business plan or what you're going to do, but do not just stay there. Before you ever really get into the business or quit your job, start thinking about where your funding is going to come from. There's so many different ways to get funding and have all of the money that your business needs to sustain you and your family year after year after year. If you start your business and you focus on the funding first, you will be more successful than 90% of the businesses out there. Let me tell you how to do that. So the first thing that you want to do when you are getting funding for your startup, you want to make sure that you have an actual business set up. I'm sorry, but it's very hard to fund a business that's not a real business. So go ahead and name your business. Go ahead and register that business with the Secretary of State. Either get that LLC or a C Corp or an S Corp, whichever entity that you want to, but make sure that people can find you on the Secretary of State so that it's a real business. Additionally, get the EIN number, get a professional phone number, get a professional email, and get a professional website. Doing just those minimum things, which I have students that have done that in one day, is going to unlock business funding. This way you can start to build business credit in your business's name and not have to rely on your personal credit or your savings to fund your business. If you do these steps, literally there's tons of banks, lenders, all kinds of people, angel investors that will lend you money for your business. But people will not lend to a business that's not a real business. So don't just take the cheap way and try to do a DBA or make a logo without having a real business. Go ahead and follow those steps that I gave you so that your business can get real funding real fast. So now that you have your business set up and you understand why, let me tell you about some hidden places that you can get business funding as a startup. The first thing that you want to do and make sure that you have, like I said, those minimum things, is you're going to need a business checking account. A lot of times when you go to get a business checking account, we are in historic times. There has been more money available for businesses than ever before in history. I have students that are going to get business checking accounts and they are getting offered business credit cards right on the spot. That's one. Another thing that you want to do, and this is completely free, set up a PayPal business account, a Square business account, and go ahead and start putting it through some transactions. You want to also make sure you're making regular deposits into your business checking account because there's tons of lenders that will start to lend to your business with 3 months of business checking account statements. So all you have to do, especially if you have a job, is start putting some money into your business checking account so that you can show some income and some revenue into your business. You don't want to do anything unethical, but you want to start showing that your business is making money and you are investing in your business. Most people will not invest in your business if you haven't invested first. Another hidden secret, and this is top secret, is there's 2 new lenders out there that are lending to people that are startups and to people that may have some troubled credit. One of them is Axion. That's accion.org. They are a community development institution. That means they are funding small businesses, startups, mostly for minorities, women, veteran, disabled people, and things like that. However, they have funding for all types of businesses, especially startups. That's secret number 1. Secret number 2 is a company called 5 Star Processing. They do merchant processing, very similar to PayPal and Square, where it will allow you to take credit cards for your business. Once you get that account set up, again, you can have a credit score as low as 300. I'm gonna put a link below for you. You can go ahead and click that link and they will get you set up and they will give you business credit as a startup.
You've got a business idea and it's going to change the world. And all you need to make it happen is funding. You've seen the TechCrunch articles, the $1 million rounds at $1 million valuations. If that company managed to raise money, why can't you? I'm going to explain everything I know about startup funding in this video. From starting the company to Series A, B, and all the alphabet series. We're a venture-backed company ourselves. We know how this works. Literally, what we do for a living is teach founders how to navigate this stuff. But there's a crucial thing that you have to understand first, which is whether or not your startup can raise money. Startups fall into one of 2 baskets. This basket is the explosive growth kind, the million-dollar rounds, the crazy valuations, the TechCrunch kind. Investors will pour money into this company because they are betting on that explosive growth. The way they recover all that money that they invest in is if A, another company buys this business, or B, if shares become public and are traded in the stock market, which I guess also means people acquire this business. And when the paycheck finally comes, some OG investors in a company can make 300 times their original investment. That is the venture capital game. But what about this other basket? Well, this business is not looking to be sold or to IPO. It's looking to just be a normal business and make money. Maybe the founders really like working for that company, being their own boss. Maybe they want to inherit this business to their children. Maybe they don't want to share control with anyone. They want that 51%. If you're in this basket, you're perfectly fine, but putting it simply, you can't raise money from investors in the other basket. You don't get to raise $1 million for 15% of your company. It's a completely different deal. And I can make a video about how those companies get funded, but today we're not gonna focus on that kind. Today we're focusing on the explosive growth kind. So let's finally talk about funding now. The whole idea with this kind of company is that you want to reach that insane explosive growth milestone and then cash out. And doing this will cost you a lot of money. Fueling explosive growth means spending really aggressively for many years, actually spending more money than your company makes. Think of how much money Facebook burned before it made a profit, or Amazon. Everyone is betting on that long-term goal, and if it pays off really well. But to get there quickly absolutely requires external capital. Now, of course, it'd be a lot easier to raise all this money up front, but nobody's willing to take such a big risk of funding all the money that this company will need up front, so you have to raise it in rounds. Pre-seed rounds are meant to build and launch products. Seed rounds are usually raised when the product is launched and when it's growing, and they're raised to make things move faster. Series A rounds are usually raised when the company has over $1 million in annual revenue. Series B rounds are for companies in their $10 million revenue range. And as you approach investors, you want to make sure that you focus on investors that fund businesses in your stage. If you're a pre-seed company, you should not waste time talking to seed investors because it's a new move and you're really wasting your precious time. The requirements for the pitch deck also change because pre-seed decks are mostly about the team, the team's capacity to build the product. Seed decks are much more about customer traction, about understanding your initial growth tactics and making sure that you can replicate them. Series A rounds and beyond are much more about proving a deep understanding of your growth numbers, proving that your financials are healthy, and as the rounds get bigger, understanding what an exit could look like for your business. Very crucially, as you go through these rounds, you're going to be diluted. Usually by Series B stage, founders will no longer own a controlling majority of the business. That means their total shares will represent less than 50% of the company. That does mean that somebody else gets to approve your salary raises. It means that the board can fire you if you don't do your job well.
Mike?
And the question for you is, well, do you want to own 100% of $1 million company, or do you want to own 20% of a $500 million business? I hate the term lifestyle business, but this is what the 100% of $1 million means. A business that helps you live comfortably, being your own boss, and make probably more money than you would do on a normal job. The other side is rough and painful and risky, and it's probably the only way to build billion-dollar companies. Yes, you can probably find exceptions, but for the most part, that's the way it works. Your business is going to rely on investors for many years. And there are horror stories about founders being ousted by the board. There are solid companies that go out of business because they run out of money simply because they just couldn't agree on a valuation with investors and they just couldn't raise the next round of funding because they just depend on them. One of the most common reasons for this is getting stuck between rounds. So many companies die because they get stuck between one round and the other, and nobody really wants to pour money into a sinking ship. Pre-seed money should last you to seed. It should be enough to get you to seed stage and a few extra months to actually close the next round of funding. But if you finish your product and you aren't able to launch it, then you're in a bit of this catch-22 situation. Too early for a seed round, but too late to raise pre-seed money again. We actually got stuck between seed and Series A, and we have to scramble to survive, and well, that's a story for another day. This is where budgeting how much money you actually need and budgeting that accurately is crucial. And that's the CFO's job, once we can afford one. And before then, well, it's mostly your job as a founder. I had to learn how to do this myself, and hopefully for my next company, I don't make the same mistakes. Your focus when you raise money besides actually sealing the deal, should be about this runway, about understanding, about being absolutely 100% sure that the money that you're gonna raise will be enough to get the company to the next fundable milestone and not get stuck in the middle. But let's actually talk about the funding round now. What's the procedure to get investor money into the company? I have a little trivia for you. How do you give shares to investors? A, the company creates new shares for every new investor. B, the company reserves some shares to give to them. C, the founders sell part of their shares to investors. Or D, the percentage ownership is redistributed every time. Let me explain this in the simplest terms I can. If Walt and Jesse get together to build, I don't know, a math lab, and they want to split it equally, they'll each get, let's say, 10 shares, 50-50. Walt's shares will never change hands or be sold to investors, nor will Jesse's. If they ever decide to bring an investor to their startup, what'll happen is the company will create new shares for them. Walt will still have 10 shares, Jesse will still have 10 shares, and the new investors will get new shares in their name. And by doing that, the company's total shares will change. Walt's 10 shares will no longer be 50% of the total. So the percentages have changed, but not the shares that each one of them owns. So the answer to this question is A. For most companies around the world, issuing new shares, that's how things are gonna work, especially for C Corps in the US, which is the standard business type. Now, answer D would be correct for LLCs, at least in the US. But LLCs are not a great practical type of business entity for multiple rounds of funding because you have to redistribute shares all the time, and it's a very complicated legal mess. Now, the question is, how many shares would an investor get? And for that, we need to talk about valuations. At its core, a startup valuation is like betting odds, agreeing on how much to risk and what reward to get if the investor is right. But a bunch of things come into play. In a startup, it's likely that more and more investors will come in the future, so the chunk of the pie left to founders needs to be enough to keep them motivated and working hard for years or decades to come. So let's use a story that we're all pretty familiar with. Facebook. Peter Thiel was Facebook's first investor, and he agreed to give Mark and Eduardo $500,000 in exchange for 10% of the company. So if $500,000 are 10% of the company, that means the entire company is worth $5 million. That's the post-money valuation because assumes the money is already part of the business. But that also means that before the money came in, the business was valued at $4.5 million. That was the pre-money valuation. So now let's think of that in bricks. Let's assume that Mark, Eduardo, and all the other guys who were part of Facebook had established the company with a total of 100 shares. Again, if the company is worth $4.5 million, then each share is worth $45,000. Peter Thiel's $500,000 investment would be enough to buy about 11 shares of this business, adding up to $495,000. So the company creates those shares and sells them to Peter. So we end up with 111 shares. Peter has 11 out of 111 shares, which is about 9.9%. For example, Eduardo's 30 shares, for example, have been diluted. They no longer represent 30% of the company. They are now 27% of the total. So after all of these rounds of funding, the number of shares that you start with as a founder probably hasn't changed. The difference is the company has issued a bunch of new shares for your investors and potentially for your employees. And that's what we call dilution. Same number of shares that represent a different percentage of the business. Now, if these valuation numbers seemed arbitrary, it's because they kind of are. There is no real way to put a value on a business that makes no money. There is no way to value an idea or a team. Some founders will go through this painful process of paying a company to do a valuation of their business plan and their forecast, but trust me, most of the time, that is pretty useless. At pre-seed stage, a valuation is usually just an agreement between the company and the investors on how much risk versus reward there's going to be. If you have a bunch of investors lined up and they're all looking to get a piece of the action, you can probably push for a better valuation. If you don't have a choice and there's only one investor interested, well, you don't really have a lot of bargaining power. Remember that we're in the explosive growth basket. All businesses in this basket are supposed to become huge unicorns, public companies. So your forecasts today aren't what makes the difference. They don't make you special. It's your ability to execute. Standard valuations for pre-seed companies these days are $3 to $5 million. Again, under the assumption that the company that you're working on is a $100 million or more company. At seed stage and on, it's a bit different. There is revenue now, or there should be. So investors can imagine a valuation based on a multiple of your growth, maybe 5 or 10 times your annual revenue. Now, a quick disclaimer here is that having investors in your cap table, them owning shares in your business comes with complications, extra work. There's compliance, reporting, there's board decisions. It also requires you to agree on a valuation in order to understand how many shares they're going to get. And one way to delay all those awkward and sometimes, because of the lawyers, expensive conversations, and honestly to make your life easier, is to use a convertible note.